Nominate Charlie Fisher for chair.
Hear me okay? Hear me? Going through? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. I am Nancy Templeton with CH Planning. We are the consultants who are hired to do the Boothman Town Center Vision Plan. And I think if you can start the slideshow. Are you on slideshow? Oh, okay. Um, so we started the Boothwyn Town Center Vision Plan pretty much about a year ago. We kicked off in January 2020. And I'm very happy to be at the point where we are presenting the final draft plan. Hopefully, you all got a chance to read the plan. It is also for the members of the public, it is on the township's website. So we are again in the final draft stage. I'm going to present an overview of the plan and answer any questions anybody has. And just to get started, now, if we go to the next slide, I want to start off by thanking all of those who supported this process, were involved in this process. Special shout out to Barb Kelly, who was a great leader for this process, for this project, and also our wonderful Town Center Vision Plan Task Force, did an excellent job guiding us through this process. Any task force members here? Raise your hand. Pam and Ed. Um, they were really critical to this process. So if we go to the next slide, um, just to recap where we are, all the tasks we completed. Again, this was about a year in the making, and where we are now, reviewing with the Planning Commission. Then we'll present to the Board of Commissioners next month with the target adoption for March, hopefully by the end of March. The next slide. Just to, provide the overview of why we did this, why this plan came about, to establish a guiding smart growth development for economic development, attracting diverse business and housing options, creating a walkable community, improving the visual appearance, preserving historic character, and establishing a unique identity that really encapsulates the heart of Boothman as a town center. Next slide. Our study area, we developed the boundaries of the study area with the task force and decided on the boundaries from creek to creek, and then from Kingsman Road, just north of the CSX rail line, to pretty much down to I-95. Town center, we looked to Delaware County's comprehensive plan, land use framework as sort of the inspiration and the guiding principle for the plan. Boothwyn is identified as a town center in Delaware County's land use framework, 2035 land use framework, and Chichester Avenue, which is the heart and spine of Boothwyn, is identified as an activity corridor. And Delaware County, provides some descriptions of the character and the goals and aspirations for town centers and activity corridors. The next slide. These are some of the key principles and characteristics of the town center, coming from Delaware County's model design guidelines for central places and activity corridors. Go to the next slide. Just to want to go over our community engagement process. We had several different techniques and tools for obtaining community feedback on the process, on the plan. Working with the task force was kind of the kickoff of getting community engagement. The task force represents stakeholders from different areas of the community, residents, elected officials, planning commission, business owners, historic resource experts. But then our first community-wide open public engagement was to have a open house. That in June of 2020, and we teamed up with the Heart and Soul process because while they're different projects, they are related, and we were able to really get a really good turnout for the public open house. If we go to the next slide, this is where we reached out to get feedback on essentially what do we think, what does the community think are the biggest issues that need to be addressed, and what are some of the opportunities that we should be pursuing. So we did this through several, if you were at the open house or if you weren't, what we did was we had several boards around the room. We did something called a SWOT analysis, where people wrote down what they thought the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats were. We also did a dotmocracy, where people placed dots on where they thought the most important opportunities were. So this first slide shows one of the dotmocracy results, where we asked what issues were the most critical in Boothwyn. Traffic was clearly number one. Cleanliness was close second. Parks and spaces and business options were also very highly regarded as top issues. Go to the next slide. We also asked which type of businesses recruited in Boothwyn. Dine-in restaurants was number one. Breweries and brew pubs were next. People like to eat and drink. Those are very important aspects of town center. Theater, bakery, close behind and didn't get much interest in pharmacies and drugstores. But we also had sort of the post-it notes there to get feedback from anybody who didn't see something they wanted on that list, and we got some interesting responses for that. Outdoor dining. It's funny because we have a lot of fast food places listed, but we also have anything but fast food. So we have viewpoints, but that's okay. Next slide. We asked which town center was the best model for Boothman. Vast majority pointed to media, but as someone else offered, they like media, but with better parking. Parking is also a big issue. Next slide. This is the SWOT analysis where people wrote down the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm not going to list all of them, but they are also up. These boards are up on the website. If we go to the next one. The weaknesses. You know, people see the word adult theater there. We are not proposing an adult theater, but there's an opportunity. It's just sometimes we can't control what people do. But that's not one of our plans. And then what they consider to be threats. We also did a community survey. This was an online survey, and we also had people fill out hard copy. It was somewhat along the lines of what we asked people at the open house. We asked people to let us know where they lived, what they thought were the most positive things, the best features about Boothman, and shopping and dining business options were number one. Walkability was not far behind. And people were ranked very highly too. Right? We asked what the most critical issues were. Traffic and congestion, again, came up number one. Parking is an issue, cleanliness, safety, and business options were in the top 5. Asked people how often they went and shopped and visited the town center. And the majority of people said weekly, which is very impressive, I think. Not very many people said never. Next slide. Then we asked what we shop or visit more often if there were these types of things, better parking, more places to shop and eat. Again, shopping and eating and dining in were big issues. Top 5 businesses that should be recruited. Again, dine-in restaurants, shops, and places to eat and drink were highly, highly rated. Next slide. So we also did a public open house too. This was after we assessed all the feedback and we came up with some 9 recommendations, development concepts. I'll go through a little bit later, but this is where we presented our concepts and ideas and recommendations and presented them to the public, and they gave us their slide. So out of the engagement, we came up with the list of priority issues and opportunities that we wanted to focus our recommendations and implementation strategy on. We also developed a vision statement to kind of encapsulate what the overall direction and plan and vision. Boothman Town Center is a welcoming community with a unique historic identity and strong sense of place. The town center features housing options for every lifestyle, diverse dining and shopping options, centrally located cultural and entertainment spaces, and public spaces for community gathering and recreation. Next slide. So here we are recommending some concepts and ideas for how to take that vision statement and put it in reality. I'm just starting to look at sort of the different contact zones within the town center. We have the main core, which is the red area. That's the downtown core along Chichester Avenue. The purple areas are the gateways. This is the impression you get when you enter the town center. The yellow areas are the traditional residential neighborhoods, and the blue are the educational anchors. That's Rochester Middle School and Boothman Elementary. Next, we have sort of the conceptual framework of development opportunities. Infill development is the areas in blue where we envision sort of filling in the gaps or with new development. Purple areas where development, and in the green areas potential for public parks and open space, or more just a gathering. Those are the areas where mobility plan has a lot going on. We have several ideas. Primarily what's shown on this map is, and we'll go into a few of them in more detail, primarily what's shown on this map is where we identify major streetscape improvement along Chichester Avenue. Areas where we think there should be a redesign of an intersection. We're highlighting where PennDOT is proposing the roundabouts, but also, and we'll get into this a lot more, is redesigning Blue Ball Avenue and Chichester Avenue. That is we think, a very problematic intersection that needs, and also replacing the CSX grid, a lot more multimodal. Also showing improving and filling in the gaps in the sidewalk network, and also introducing a new trail network. These are what I have called catalyst projects. These are projects that, while we have many projects and strategies proposed, I'm just sort of highlighting these as ones that we think are going to have the most impact. When you want to implement a plan, it's good to really kind of focus on those small number of projects that either, in case of zoning, is something you can do and early on and without a lot of investment, and also major projects that will really make an impact and set the identity or establish the identity for the town center. Chichester Avenue streetscape is really something that should be focused on within the first year. And then there are some redevelopment projects that, while longer term and more complicated, are really something that is good to really have a good vision for. And we're talking mainly at the gateways, where we call the North Gateway at the railroad, where we enter crossing the railroad, South Gateway at the new roundabouts at I-95, and then Boothman Crossroad is, again, this is the center of town. This is the heart of the downtown. This is an important area to focus. So we'll talk about some more detail about those in a minute. Next slide. So the town center mixed use zoning, again, this is something that can be done early on and would be a new district in the town center. Focuses a lot on design standards, higher density, higher building heights, smaller lot sizes, increasing the coverage allowances. This is where you want to build up area in the township where density should be directed. So you want to have zoning that encourages, also has some standards in it to make sure that the design quality and vision for the town center. We do look at, Delaware County has some very good model ordinances that we can draw from to create that new district. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of what a new streetscape design could look like. This is an example section is at Chichester Ave and Drexel in front of Gibbons. So the top is the existing, and then the proposed is, through redevelopment and streetscape design and zoning standards, this is how this sort of ideal town center. Slide. Okay, this is the North Gateway redevelopment idea. Again, this is how potential opportunity for redeveloping that entrance to the northern entrance into the town center with mixed-use development, potentially a new library on Kingsman Road, which is already kind of being looked at. New townhouse development, new multifamily development, new parking areas. This is, again, where people come in and from the north, and you want to. The next slide. The Boothman Town Center concept, and this is really there's a lot of change happening here. One of them being we did propose to sort of end Blue Ball Avenue at Osceola, eliminate that intersection with Chichester Avenue. That is something that PennDOT wasn't really excited about, but they didn't say no to it. But I think eventually, whatever happens here, that intersection needs to, whether it's closing it at Blue Ball or realigning it as part of a redevelopment strategy. There really should be a long-term vision where that intersection is. And this plan shows in its place doing a public plaza, public space surrounded by retail and community space with municipal parking spaces included. And the South Gateway is really focusing on, after PennDOT does their roundabouts, working with them to ensure that the roundabout isn't just functional, but it is also aesthetically pleasing. And it is, again, this is the South Gateway, and this is sort of through development planning, redevelopment, and landscaping and street. Really something special. Next slide. This is just sort of an overall proposed land use for the town center. I do want to go over the implementation strategy. So how we broke down the implementation strategy was to really define specific strategies and projects that are recommended for the town center, identifying funding opportunities and grants that can make, and the implementation project matrix sort of compilation of what the steps are within the first year, the next couple longer term. What are the steps within those strategies that should happen? Funded through grant opportunity. What are the partnerships with nonprofits and agencies that you need to partner with? If we go to the next slide. Essentially, again, when you want to implement a plan, it's good to have some very finite number of concrete strategies. And we came up with 16 that can, all of them having different time frames, different financial outlays, capital improvement projects. So, but they are all doable. Good to have an idea what they are, what we think, the level of effort and the partnerships would be, and are there funding opportunities? So in these in the draft plan, I go into a great level of detail, I think, describing each of these. Go to the next slide. This is a list of funding opportunities that I focused on. It is not a complete list. There are a lot of funding opportunities, and new ones are always coming up too. And with the new infrastructure bill, there are probably going to be a lot more. These are just, the few that I think are the most realistic, targeted to the type of project that we're proposing. Go to the next slide. So the matrix, the implementation matrix, it's really broken down in time frames. Early actions are within the first year. Adopted, and it's not, the way it's presented, it's not to say that we didn't take each of those 16 strategies and says, okay, this one, it happens this year, happens this year. All of these strategies have steps that happen through a period, so that's the way I tried to lay it out. Early action items are, we think, again, going back to the zoning ordinance, creating a new zoning ordinance and doing the streetscape plan. Those are projects then can be started and completed within. Other things are really just setting the stage for the other projects. And two very important things I stress in the plan is there are a lot of transportation improvements being proposed, especially in Chichester. And PennDOT coordination will be. And the very first thing of the implementation is to meet with the PennDOT Connects plan. That will be to go over all of the planned improvements. And they'll be able to kind of guide through studies that need to be done, plans that need to be pursued, and what are realistic times. Another action item, early action item, is to meet with the Pennsylvania Downtown Center. They guide the Main Street program for Pennsylvania through DCED, of Economic Development, because one of a big implementation project, actually a very crucial one, is to establish a downtown improvement district, BID, or business improvement district. And those of you who don't know, many of you may know, it is a collaboration of businesses that agree to pay a special assessment. And that assessment goes toward such as marketing, cleaning, picking up litter, facade treatments, getting the facade. Grants can be used for that, improving signage, the streetscape design, and that this district would be led by a manager. It's led by actually a board, owners, people from the township, some residents. It's really a collection of a manager would need to be hired because the manager is kind of responsible. They apply for grants, they manage grants, work to see the projects through. It's a big job, but it does rely on the businesses agreeing to pay that assessment. If it doesn't happen, it's not implemented. It would just, a lot of it would fall on the township, and the township doesn't have the capacity to do all this. Downtown improvement is, there are a lot of examples where done well, they do a lot of improvement. I know my city district in Philadelphia, they're like bids in Philadelphia. The King of Prussia bid, media has a bid. Most town centers that are very active have some sort of bid or business improvement. We can scroll through the slides. This is really just an overview of the early actions, short-term actions. I know it's a little fuzzy and can't read very well, but I do want to, the main thing to take away from this is that implementation is, it's ongoing. Everything, things change. This is something that needs to be up, monitored, and evaluated. There are new grant opportunities. But ultimately, I think it's establishing a very strong vision and strong. So next steps, so after everyone reads the final draft and provides their input, we can do. It would have to be like the last round of revisions before we take it to the Board of Commissioners for presentation and review and public review. And again, ideally plan adoption by March. That is the end of my presentation and my overview. Happy to take questions. I did, yeah.
The historical accuracy. Other thing, resources key. It's on. There, key is numbered for the map that accompanies it, but I think that it might be helpful if you could add the parcel IDs so that those can then be mapped back to the historic resource survey. As for example, when I looked at the numbers, I thought, oh, number one should be the Robertson House, which is further down Chichester Avenue. So on the historic resource survey, they're also numbered consecutively. And so your map key is numbered, but only for the town. So I was thinking if you add the parcel ID on the map key, that would allow us to map those locations back to the historic resource survey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we could look into it. We have the GIS data that we created is all going to the township, and all of that information in the GIS data set. Whether it needs to be on the plan, not sure if that's useful, but as long as you have the data, is that?
I mean, it was just confusing for me because
okay.
And I thought I understood what I was looking at, but resource number 21 on the survey is my house, and I looked at 21 on the key, and I thought that's right, but that could be. But then
yeah, I think we just had to consolidate it for the town center.
Yep, I understood what you did once it clicked.
Okay.
And there are 3 more sites that need to be added, and I can send them to you. There's the bridge, the McKay's Bridge on Meeting House Road. There's the McKay Spring House. It's on McKay Avenue. And these are all recent additions. And the other one is the childhood home of Sadie Dixon Waters. The house burned down, but probably want to locate the site on the map.
Yeah, if you could send me that.
I can send you them. And then I had questions, figure 8 development opportunities. That was page 27. The proposed LERTA district, it includes Willowbrook Apartments, and I didn't understand why that was, since those are really residential.
Well, the LERTA boundary is intended to provide the tax incentive for businesses located. Doesn't mean every property is subject to the LERTA incentive. It is supposed to be, I believe, business. I'm not sure. My understanding, but I know you have a consultant that there could be exceptions. I guess the answer is it's not a complete uninsured though. I think you have a consultant who does. Mhm. Yeah, we could do that.
Maybe the mask helps. We'll try it that way.
And also on the subject of the LERTA, I noticed that between Oviola and Meeting House Road, Second and Third Avenue, that the residents, the homes, the private residents are carved out of the LERTA. But it occurred to me that's a redevelopment area, and if a owner, if a company came in, a developer, bought those properties and wanted to develop the whole block, then how could the LERTA be applied consistently by a block when you're carving out, that corner there? So it just seemed like Second and Third Avenue, those private residences should be included in the LERTA.
A big point. And I'll just reiterate the LERTA process.
Right.
Just bring that.
I do have more questions. There's references to public space. That township owned space, or is that proposed township would acquire those properties?
In some cases, they already own it. Most cases, they already own it. The one I'm showing on the map, that intersection after all, as it's redeveloped, there's a public over there. That's that.
That's what I was
That was
thinking. of.
that would probably be the district running that.
Parking lot now. Or fuel oil for the most.
It's if that were to be redeveloped, if somebody came in and wanted to purchase properties and redevelop, that is the vision. Nobody's coming in and taking it.
I was just curious if the township already owns it, or if that would be a future acquisition proposed.
It would be whole area is private property. In that
That's what I thought.
crossroad area, and it would probably be some kind of public-private structure. Or it would be the
You talked about the mobility enhancement avenue next to agency. It's not really an open street, at least as far as I'm aware. But I didn't see that the plan necessarily proposed that it be open. I'm curious as to the status of that. Do you know where I mean between Meeting House and McKay?
But yeah, I did not propose reopening. That's something, it didn't come up. For engagement, task force meetings. Is
The
that
only reason-
something that,
Well, the reason I say it is because of traffic congestion at
Sure.
Chichester Meeting House Road and any other roadway that's going to get traffic off of those two roads would probably reduce congestion. I don't know how the people on McKay Avenue would feel about having reopened, but I didn't know what the status is. Is it owned by Community Action Agency? Still a public street, but they closed it off for the safety.
does anyone else know the answer to that?
Oh, Ed does?
Commissioner Ed Rakowski up at Chichester Township, 2012 Mill Road, 3.3. First, I want to thank Nancy for the CH planning. As she stated from day one, Barb and I, Wawa Development, we had a vision. That's all it was. This task force took it and ran. To answer some of your questions, Cindy, on Second and Third Avenue, alerters, the suggestion is not even on paper. Her map shows if you look at the map, there is commercial property that wraps around the back properties on Second Avenue and Third Avenue. Why you don't include in the map itself, it's C1 now. So I think she did that as a C1 plan. My understanding, Second Avenue was vacated to the school district for a driveway. So it is the property of DCC. So that was never even in the discussion in any of the meetings that we've had with the task force. We were saying the task force was residents, business, Mr. Coleman from Delaware County Community Action. Insurance, nationwide. I mean, we have business owners, residents that were a little outside of the Boothman Town Center. Boothman Town Center came in, it was this big. I proposed today, which made sense. There was a lot that we could do within the first year or two. But Nancy's right, we have to be able to have a committee together to see it through. These are just suggestions. PennDOT with Opiola, PennDOT with Google Avenue. That was my question from day one with PennDOT. We met with PennDOT, we met with SEPTA, with Delaware County Plan. Everybody's seen this and worked hard at it. Adoption of a plan of a vision. And that vision could change throughout. Louisville Avenue was like the worst thing that ever came up. One thing I did say from day one, nobody eminent domain in anything. Not even getting involved with that. Louisville Avenue, I asked the state, that study, the safety study they did had anything with Louisville Avenue. We feel that the study was more Chichester Meeting House, not Louisville, because we all know it's bad. We made recommendations, Nancy, myself, and George, meeting with PennDOT. No right-hand or no left-hand turns out of Malatesta, Scott, and Beasley. They were completely against it. That's not in our plan. But what's in the plan that we could do is an impact study right away. So it's not going to cost us make a lot of money. An impact study so we have it. So if you have a developer coming in and say, hey, I want to acquire those two properties. The ultimate goal for PennDOT is have somebody buy those two properties and they can redesign that intersection and they don't have to worry about it. You know that's not going to happen. Suggestions were going into Louisville Avenue only, and then coming out on Louisville and making it right, or going up to Louisville or Opiola and going up Louisville too. And our suggestion at that time was everybody go head on up to Columbia and get everybody out. The one suggestion that was, not sure if it's in the plan, that I highly would recommend, even on the impact study, was we were saying no left-hand turns from Beasley and Scott and Red or Malatesta. But what they wouldn't mind is no left-hand turn on Beasley. Why? Because when that roundabout gets there, it's going to be close to Beasley. And now that Wawa's moved out of the way a little bit, it makes more sense to no left-hand out of Beasley, but it's still allowing it on Scott and Malatesta. That's what we need to see. Everybody's what if, this and that. It's just ideas that we got from SEPTA, PennDOT, residents that live here, the openness, your concerns with the historical stuff, everybody's. don't have something on paper, and I think they did a phenomenal job, this task force, for a year now. So be here in February to adopt it or to present it to the Board of Commissioners. There's things we could do now that doesn't really impact, you know, a lot more work to do. And I think, I could say for myself, I'm shocked on what we see right now at the Boothman Town Center. I hope I answered the questions. I mean,
Yeah, that was helpful. I thought
Yeah.
the plan was really well written. It was
Right.
easy to follow, you know, and questions popped up as
Oh,
I went through.
absolutely.
Things that you all might have considered, like, you know,
we considered everything and we
you
got the
can't throw
feedback
everything into
and
one report.
we went back again, but we're to the point now that where we have to go. And I think my goal as commissioner for that board, impact study, look for the grant and do the things to go with it. I will say one thing, I'm glad to see that the Delaware County Planning, glad to see something. So bigger vision than I thought, but hey, I'm just one person and that's why we have it. I'm proud to say that the residents that were involved, they were open to every group effort. One comment, but now I will support 100% to see this through, because I know we could do better in that whole area.
And I like it.
Feel free to give Nancy the, once again, I think maybe the Lord was maybe a step ahead of that area right now, because we're not in that stage throughout the whole town. I would leave it out, so it doesn't have the residents of this.
I think it might be a good idea to attract business and
Oh,
understand why that corner was cut off, and I
Well,
thought
it's
it could pose problems in the future. If
Right.
you move forward with the learn.
And,
That's all.
that Second and Third Avenue is cut up that way between residents on Oakville. Back to Smitty's old place. Stops there. It's weird how it goes.
Thanks, Ed. I do have a couple more, Nancy. Um, There's a reference to the Delaware County design guidelines. I
Yes.
tried to find it on their website and I couldn't, so I was wondering if I could just get a link.
Yes, I can send you a link. Yes, absolutely.
I just mentioned an overlay, and that's something I was wondering about. Then you talked about the district, because architecturally, I do have a concern about new construction and additions.
Mhm.
So, you know, nobody's saying everything should look historic. That's not at all the case, but
Mhm.
some of the materials perhaps and the building forms, maybe it would make sense if there were restrictions. So I didn't know if any of that was contemplated.
Yes, very much so. Again, I would look to Delaware County's model ordinance and design guidelines, and I can send you a link. You know, there's only so far our municipalities planning code, which is our, you know, our state enabling legislation for zoning. He only lets you go so far with regulating the way things look,
Mhm.
restricting materials. Go, you know, you can request specific materials. I think you can, you know, regulate signage. You can require parking behind buildings. You can require you have to have this much window space. A lot of it has to be something that's measured or very concrete.
Yeah, I was thinking like, you know,
yeah.
appreciate the giving us the easement to put marker on their property,
Sure.
but, you know, no more signs on the house building. You know what I mean? So not that I don't want them to have signage, but, you know, putting it
Right.
smack dab in the middle of a historic resource facade, that bothers me. So those kinds
Well,
of things, that there's a little bit more control perhaps.
Yeah, you can control how many signs, you can control the size of the sign. There's a lot you can do. Um, within reason.
Okay,
But
but I didn't know if that was
yes.
contemplated in.
Yeah,
the plan.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Again, I would look at Delaware County's examples. It's not like cut and paste. You can't just always going to be
Right, right.
applicable, but
Just want to get a flavor.
they have
for it.
very good idea of what you can do and what you can get away with.
My last question has to do with the proposed hotel at the South Gateway.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a demand for that? I mean, I get that it's the access to I-95, but what's the thought process behind having a hotel in that location?
So again, these are suggestions. There's not a market, it could be
doesn't
something
happen.
else.
Okay.
I think it's more to show what the design would be and what sort of level of development you want there. Something, not a little drugstore. You want
Right.
something that's a little compact. I don't know for sure that a hotel would work or not. To me, it seems like a good location, something you would want. And
I was just curious.
I don't think it's going to be a huge Hilton, but and it may
Marriott
not be,
Courtyard
or it could be
or an office building.
an
that's,
office
yeah,
building,
easily
exactly. But something with
accessible.
that scale, that's what I'm thinking. It's more
Okay.
scale, like
All right.
something tall, something attract a lot of people. Looks good. Fills in the space a lot.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Chuck?
Yeah, quick question. As far as the DIDs, if one is established in an area, is 100% buy-in from the businesses needed for it?
No, the the authorizing legislation says that there is a process. You have to do a big plan before you can get accepted as established as a bid. You have to have a board of directors. All of the businesses, there's a public outreach process. You have to have public meetings and public hearings with the businesses that would be affected. And the way it's written in the legislation, if a business objects, they have to say so in writing. And 40% have to object for it to not go through. Under 40% to object, more than 40% or more of the businesses object in writing, then it wouldn't.
Basically, we're talking about establishing another level of taxation that, if 39% of the businesses object to it, what are you gonna, what are you gonna foreclose on the property to collect the
No,
taxes?
no,
Or,
no.
I mean, how exactly is that gonna
Um,
work?
I understand where you're coming from. I mean, it's like anything. If a tax is raised or imposed, there's a level of acceptance. There's also appeals. You can appeal it. But as far as if somebody doesn't pay it, I don't think it goes to that extreme. I don't really know.
Yeah, but
for
there's
sure. You
gotta
have to
be, there's gotta
kinda-
be some measure of legally collecting it, because then no one would pay it.
right, and get the benefits from it. There are a significant amount of benefits that you get street clean. You grants to improve your facades and signage. You get marketing, you get promotion.
Yeah, but going with that, there's already a significant amount of taxes being charged in this
Right.
township.
I know, I understand.
Tell the businesses
And
they're gonna pay more.
and I thought of that when I said a bid would be a good idea, but it is a burden on the businesses, and you don't have a lot now. I mean, if you're trying to attract more, kind of a hard sell sometimes. So it may be that it doesn't. My main recommendation is, as with many things, you have to do a feasibility study. You have to meet with the Pennsylvania Downtown Center, even see if this makes sense. And ultimately, at least in the beginning, it might not make sense. It might not work for you. I'm not trying to put all the eggs in the bid basket, because I think you could still implement this plan. Bid. But I think it would be accomplished more with the bid. If the bid doesn't happen for whatever reason, if it's just a study, ask the businesses, nobody's interested, you can't force it on.
Thank you.
Joe?
Is there anything in the plan about potentially putting some type of signage, maybe on like 95 or the Conchester, falling into the town center?
I mean, like a road sign on
Yeah, you know.
95? Sure. I mean, it's not in the plan, but it's definitely something. I mean, we could put
a main artery running.
it's
right
makes sense,
through it.
yeah. Like here for the Boothman Town.
Greg?
Everyone has covered points that I would have asked, so I have no further questions.
Okay, Nancy, I have a few questions. Let's stick with the bid for a second.
Okay.
I think the bid's conceptually a great idea. However, I look at what presently is along Chichester Avenue, and you don't have a existing, if you will, let's look at media, business strip where you have store property owned and operated as a business consecutively or straight up and down the street, representing facades and buildings and everything else like that. So I guess my main concern here is that we're trying to draw people in to develop within the community. All right. The concept that a bid is either in existence or is contemplated, right, may be something that may not serve, at least initially, as something that would encourage me to invest or to locate and start my new business. As Chuck was saying, who needs another tax? On the other hand, if we had an existing 50, 100 businesses along this area where you could show 60% interest or better, and that's what you were saying, 40% not, but 60% or better, you might be able to float this, and it makes a lot of sense. So I guess my concern is this a good thing at the onset, or is this something that should be footnoted that a bid is a conceptual idea going forward?
What I think is you should start early planning for it to see if it works. And that includes meeting with the Pennsylvania Downtown Center, talk to them and say, we're interested in doing a bid. What do we need to know? What do we have to do? What are the ups? What are the positives and minuses? Do we need a critical mass of businesses already? Part of getting established as a bid is you have to do a plan. Plan shows that part of that is financial. You have to show sustained ideas for sustained finance. If it doesn't work out right, if you do the plan and it shows, look, this is just viable right now, need more businesses to come in, then yeah, you may have to wait a while. But
Okay,
you can start the process.
I'm not on one side or the other
Oh, I know.
of what you're saying or what you're
Not
proposing.
everybody loves the idea. of it
I'm
because
just thinking that you need a critical mass to make, if you're going to promise somebody a facade, you better have enough money in the pot to be able to put one up. If you got 20 businesses and
that's why you can't
and
just go
whatnot.
in and say, I want to do a bid. You have to
Right.
plan.
all right, so that's what my concern is. I don't want people to look at this and find reasons to say no. I want
know, I
people to look
understand.
at this and find reasons to say this is a good idea. All right. The Blue Ball Avenue, to me, with my experience the last 3 or 4 years here on the Planning Commission, talking about PennDOT and what they're willing and what they're not willing to do, there's a lot that goes along with Blue Ball Avenue other than an intersection. And there's a lot that PennDOT could ask for if we were to take ownership of Blue Ball Avenue. And so therefore, I don't know if financially the township should be tackling something like that, because along with that could be taking ownership of that within the township, which includes, I think, Ed, a bridge that goes over 95? Yeah, and I don't know if the township's got enough money in their coffers to be able to,
I am not
maintain that
suggesting
bridge,
that
but-
I'm not suggesting you take.
well, that's what my concern would be.
Well,
If we can get PennDOT to agree,
Yeah.
all right, now you have blue ball and we straighten out the intersections. Now we have the problem with the private properties that we want to convert, hopefully, through development or whatever, into parking lots and things like that. Which I think, looking at the plan, be wonderful if we could have this center, so to speak, where people can park without a lot of difficulty in anything to enjoy what we're trying to hope for to expand along this corridor. So I guess my concern is we're selling in the plan this blue ball, and I want to know what plan B is if blue ball can't happen.
Plan B, well, in the short term, I think PennDOT was okay with restricting, turning movements onto Blue Ball from Chichester. We're okay with that. That's a short term, They were not that with handful of people. Meeting we had. The intent is for that intersection.
Well, that's where,
If it happens,
yeah, I mean, when I look at the design that's conceptualized with 4 lanes of traffic going through there, where we just put in a Wawa, and there are businesses on the right-hand side that are fronted on the street, except for the sidewalk. It would mean eliminating something, and most likely it's going to be eliminating those particular properties along that side. Okay. So let's assume that it was, and you could get a developer come in and say, hey, I'd like to buy this strip of stores and it's for sale, and they buy it. All right. Their intent is to build a parking lot because we've widened the street and taken about 30 feet off of the front of what they're currently sitting on. And then they have so much depth to that property. It seems to me it's going to extend beyond just the frontage of those particular properties. It's going to affect, well, not in front, but there would be, my sense is you're going to build a building now. So where's the parking? I'm thinking there's going to be parking in rear of buildings as not one of the proposals. Yeah. Well, I'd love to see that. I think everybody in the township would love to be able to see a municipal parking lot where businesses are located so we could all walk to them. That'd be absolutely wonderful. So that was one of my concerns. The south end, that's where currently the Sunoco station is located. That is at the south end right there. And across the street, I think on the plan, at least the one excuse me? I don't know the street. Okay, so that's the point I'm getting to. I think on the plan, it shows some development being put up there or something like that, where presently our commission just approved a building to go up there, whether it's is ultimately constructed or not. I know Jake's Fireworks has presented a plan that's been approved and to sit right where you're proposing something else. And if we're, okay, well, I thought we were talking, what I thought I saw in the presentation, and maybe I didn't, I thought I saw it was right by the roundabout and there's going to be a second roundabout. All right, that's where I'm confused. There's a second roundabout. Okay. Now it makes sense. So you're talking about by Pleasant Avenue? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. That fits a lot better now because I'm just thinking no, I understood. Understood. Listen, I think conceptually this plan is fantastic. I think we'd all love to see. I mean, if you just look at what we've done so far with the streetscape and the limited amount that's been completed so far, with the new lighting and the sidewalks and whatnot, if you go through there at night, it looks beautiful. And you can see how if we were to improve the businesses and the signage and the frontage and all that other kind of stuff, it would give an identity, a character to the actual area we're talking about. With Gibbons Park now there with great signage and whatnot for Boothman Town Center right in front of the Wawa and everything, it just makes a totally different appearance as you're coming into the community. So I'm all for, what you're talking about with the town center. I wish you well with it. Other than that, I hope you have a good reception with the Board of Commissioners. You got one commissioner on your side at this particular point. But I'd like to thank you for the presentation. It was very meaningful. And I read through your report and I thought it was very comprehensive. And I think there is enough information. If anybody would like to get a copy of that, Nancy, maybe you can tell them how they could acquire one. I'd encourage, I'd encourage anybody who might be listening this evening that if you take a look at that, you'll be very impressed if you haven't had an opportunity to come out to any of the open houses that the Boothman Town Center has held so far. It's a very impressive presentation. I think it's looking forward. I heard one of our commissioners whose initials begin with ER who said that this is a forward-looking opportunity that township has been kind of stagnant over quite a few years. And this is actually looking forward to having us regain our recognition and pride back into the township. I think one of the themes that I've heard since I've been assigned here in the Planning Commission is Chai Pride. And I think this is an opportunity to demonstrate that to anybody who would come through the township. So good luck with it. We're going to open the floor up to general comments in a little bit, so you might want to stick around just in case somebody does call in and ask a question. Before that, we had our next order of business here is a very brief update on our Heart and Soul.
So Heart and Soul is continuing to put together the action plans for the value statements, and they expect to be completed within the next month or two on that.
Okay, for those of you who may be listening, the action plans themselves are roughly drafted. And what's happening now is there has been established a specific committee for each one of the action plans with respect to the particular value statement. And they're vetting that right now with respect to making it fall in line with timeframes and recommended actions that are short-term, long-term, or midterm, similar to what the town center presentation was all about. You know, these are some things we can do right now. Here's some things that are 6 months, a year, 2 years out. And so that's what they're working on now. And that will be presented to the Board of Commissioners, and it'll also be shared with the general public in the near future. Next thing on our agenda is Saldo update. George, you might want to speak to that.
The only update that I have is that we'll have Brian Siddell at the next meeting to give a presentation as to where we're at and what are the next steps that we need to take. So we'll be able to present what's been done so far and then the timeline going forward.
Okay, now we've been working on that for a while, and there's various little committees within the township that are working on various aspects of that saldo. And so everything seems to be coming together right now. And so Brian's presentation will be worthwhile, letting us know exactly where we are. Annual report status update.
So I did ask George to distribute the draft of the report. There are a couple of items that we need help with. One is just to review it in general, make sure the facts are correct. The saldo, we did get, Chuck sent that to me today. The Heart and Soul, Joe's going to send me that. I'll add it. Boothman Town Center was one of the projects that somehow or the other got listed, but I don't have anything in my notes that we won, so I don't know if that should be removed.
I think this is where operational definitions become important. The projects I think that were referred to early on and at the conclusion of last year when we wrote the annual report had to do with specific projects within the township itself. For instance, the Linwood Heights project. And George, you can fill me in. There were a couple other ongoing projects within the township, and I think they're the particular projects we were referring to. And during the year, the Boothman Town Center concept came about, and that wasn't even contemplated in the beginning of the year. So I think it's important enough that we should make mention of it in our report, you know, with respect to exactly what it was put in place to do. But it wasn't one of the particular projects that were part of the plan that I looked at as to what was coming down the pike. Now, we had Linwood Heights, George, there are a couple others that were contemplated.
Right now, the final report purposes, what I would include is a section based off of planning. The bulk of what that would talk about would be the Linwood Heights plan, because that was the plan that was adopted within that year. You could footnote that the Boothman Town Center has a task force that's being worked on that would come in front of the board, the Planning Commission in 2022. But I wouldn't need, you don't need to go into too much detail on that.
Yeah, I would agree, because it wasn't really discussed at any of our meetings or contemplated at what our involvement might be.
That was my dilemma.
Okay.
What do I write? Because I didn't have anything.
I think George came up with an excellent idea. I love footnotes.
I'll get you the resolution.
Okay, great.
All right, now just open on the general floor. Anyone on the commission have any specific item they want to bring to our attention to discuss or contemplate? Greg?
Yeah, so notice that you had information about education and training from 2021. Are there any plans for education and training in this year?
Honestly, I've been working with George to look at what's available on the Pennsylvania site with respect to planning and zoning and whatnot. And to the extent that they come up, I'm committed to continue to ask George for funding to send us and keep us up to speed. As long as it's related to improving and maintaining our skills and whatnot with respect to this commission, I'm all for it. So you come up with something, send it to me or send it directly to George, and we'll ask the commissioners to see if they can make it happen for us.
Okay, that'll work.
Charles is getting some of the same emails that a lot of press now on
Online would be preferable to in class or in person.
I think the majority of the classes that I've seen recently have been limited to online. That's not to say that there couldn't be in-person classes offered. Okay. Yep. Chuck? Okay. Cindy? Okay, so what I'd like to do now, if you will, I'm going to open up the lines for public comment. If anybody would like to call in, the number to call in is dial 1-571-748-4021. That's 1-571-748-4021. You'll be asked to enter a PIN number. That number is 357-1690 pound. PIN number is 357. Andrew just walked out. George, you might correct me. Do you need to enter a pound before you enter the 357? All right, so it's pound 357-1690 pound. That was somewhat confusing, so let me try it again. Call-in number is 1-571-748-4021. The PIN number is pound 357-1690 pound. And we'll give it a couple minutes and see if anybody wants to call in.
Hello, I have a question.
Okay, if the caller would please state their name, address, and then follow up with your question.
Yes, this is David Santucci at 1028 Galbraith Avenue.
All right, David, the floor is yours.
So I have a couple questions on the Boothman Town Center. One, with me or with the houses on Galbraith, on Johnson, on Randall, has there been any look at studying the impact that traffic is going to be for those cars that are looking to cut through the area, that intersection between Meeting House and Chichester? And then the plan references new sidewalks in our area. What would be the timeline for that? And how are the properties going to be affected with their own existing property when sidewalks, if sidewalks were to be put in?
I'll address the sidewalk issue first. The sidewalk plan, if I recall, it was more of a midterm strategy, so something between 4 and 8 years is the recommended strategy. And that would have to take a plan to do first and grant money to build the sidewalks. Now, where we are recommending sidewalks is a recommendation. If neighbors, residents, ultimately don't want sidewalks, then that's their choice. But the plan, the town center plan is recommendations. It's a concept. So some things may not be implemented exactly as it's shown, but it's meant to show a vision, a goal. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. And what was your other question about
Any look at traffic on Randall, Johnson, Galbraith, once the town center is finished, how traffic is going to be impacted with that. These streets used to have speed bumps at one point. They've been removed, but with the new Wawa, traffic has increased, going up and down. This is a residential neighborhood for the time being. And those of us have dogs, we're out, we walk, and we're concerned about the amount of traffic that's going to be cut through on these side streets right now.
Sure. Well, whenever your goal is to increase businesses and activity, there does need to be some attention paid to the impacts, not just on Chichester, but what happens on the neighborhood streets after, that feed that business corridor. Similar to what Wawa did when they came in, they did do a significant amount of intersection and road improvements to help with the expected traffic that came along with it. When PennDOT finishes the roundabouts, that is also intended to help with congestion. And, we're looking at improvements beyond traffic in terms of the mobility. We're also looking at, again, going back to the sidewalk network, making it easier for people to park in one spot and then walk to their destination. Looking at the proposed trail network, that's one way of, again, increasing bicycle and pedestrian activity over traffic, vehicular activity. Ideally, bicyclists would take the trail instead of trying to ride on Chichester Avenue, and that would help with congestion a bit too. So I think with all of this, there's a theme and a goal of increasing business activity, but also understanding that there are going to be traffic impacts that have to be addressed. And whether it's speed bumps or something else, I think at the time, none of this is being done in a vacuum. That's why we do a plan for the whole area. That's why we didn't just look at Chichester Avenue. We looked at all the neighborhoods and understood that, yes, we want to increase activity here and draw people here, but we know that there are neighborhoods here that need to be preserved and protected too.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for your
Thank
question.
you.